We are back. Giants baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and my co-host on this wonderful show is Ian Kahanowitz. How are you, sir?
Hey, Ralph, always good to be here. Love talking some Giants baseball, as you like to put it.
I do indeed. It is Eddie Brasu's birthday today, and I'd like to note that he's a former New York Giant who played with the Mets as well as the San Francisco Giants, but he, along with Willie Mays, are the only two players, and I know this to be true because Alan Blumkin told me, and I don't even bother to check. He says it's true. It's true. The only two New York Giants to have ever played for the Mets were Eddie Brasu and Willie Mays. A few came close. They drafted Johnny Antonelli, if I'm not mistaken, and he decided that rather than open a new team or embark on whatever it was that they were embarking on, that he would retire. And so there you go. Happy birthday, Eddie Brasu. You were a terrific player with the Boston Red Sox. He gave them some good years at shortstop, and you're up in Boston Red Sox country. So it must be kismet, huh?
Yeah, Ralph. He was good. He had a few lean years until '67. I'm trying to think if he was on the team then in the Impossible Dream that year when they went to the. I think he was.
Geez, I can't think of it right offhand. I think Jake Wood was that was the Detroit second baseman. They had an impossible year too the year after, with an improbable double play combination, McAuliffe and Wood. But that's another story. We're going to talk Giants history a little bit. Not really much going on this year. Giants fans are lucky to be watching Buster Posey, who's a future Hall of Famer. I'll put it to you bluntly. That's he's in. If he retires tomorrow, he goes in 5 years to the date later. So let's talk some history. Let's talk the guy that when I grew up was not only the answer to crossword puzzles all over the country. 3 down, former player, New York Giant, 3 down, Ott, O-T-T. It's so easy to get into a crossword puzzle configuration that I'll bet of all the crossword puzzles, his name, that clue, was one of the biggest in history. And when I grew up, the Yankee fans had all these, Ruth, Gehrig, all these great Hall of Famers. I mean, Tier 1 Hall of Famers. And Mel Ott kind of got lost in some of the accolades. Mel Ott was the leading, when I was growing up, he hit over 500 home runs, leading right-hand hitting home run hitter. And he was our hero when I'm a kid from the old days. The myths told, and he later managed the Giants. And I'm going to the baseball historian extraordinaire, Ian Kahanowitz, for a Mel Ott update. What do you hear? What do you say?
Something that was really nice of you. I do have my master's in history, but I'll tell you something about Mel Ott, and let me tell you something about Mel Ott right now. You wouldn't think of him as a power hitter. The guy was 5'9" and weighed 170 pounds. And when you think about a Ruth or a Gehrig, you think of the Yankees have Aaron Judge now, who's 6'4", and 200 pounds stacked, and you think of Mark McGuire with those muscles out here, and Sammy Sosa and Ken Griffey. You think of Mantle. You think of all these guys who have hit over 500 home runs, except for Judge because he's new, but he will. And then you have Mel Ott, and Mel Ott.
I didn't realize he was that small in stature.
Oh yeah, he was small in stature, man. He was that small.
Yeah. Where did the power come from? Was it the wrist, like with Henry Aaron? Was it the torque, like with the toy cannon? Wynn was a little guy who had a lot of power in our day, but not 500 home runs worth. That's for sure. This was an extraordinary guy from that standpoint.
To answer your question, Ralph, he used a batting style. He used a batting style that was then considered unorthodox. And what he did was this. He lifted his right foot forward prior to impact of the baseball. This style helped with his power hitting. Now, more recent players back in the 80s, Harold Baines and Kirby Puckett, used that style of hitting that Mel Ott had, as well as the Japanese home run king, Sandaru O. So, Mel Ott.
Sadahara
right?
O.
Yeah.
Sadahara O.
Sadahara O.
But
Mel Ott was almost like, you could say, a pioneer of doing that. And besides being this great power hitter, he was also walked a lot because they were afraid to pitch to Mel Ott. But I will say something about Mel Ott. And Leo DeRocha, said about Ott, I never knew a baseball player who was so universally loved. Even when he was playing the Dodgers at Ebbets Field, he would be cheered, and there are no more rabid fans at Ebbets Field than Dodger fans. And, he signed with the Giants as a 16-year-old, and he would remain with the team for the rest of his life. So we're talking 1926 to 1947. You're talking about a 21-year career in baseball. And although he didn't play in the early years, John McGraw was the manager, and he was very hesitant because he saw something in Ott, and he didn't want Ott getting injured, and he said, I don't want anyone tinkering with that natural swing that I described a little bit. Giants teammate Fred Lidstrom remarked, he's in the Hall of Fame. When Ott died in 1958, his first impression was that he couldn't make the grade because of his heavy legs, but through constant play, his legs tapered, and he became, I think, about the greatest ball player we've ever seen. He was a tremendous credit to baseball and a fine fellow. Baseball will miss Mel Ott. And, like you mentioned, Ott was adored by the hometown Giant fans. He was a six-time league leader for the National League in homers. He hit 30 or more home runs 8 times, while also compiling 8 straight seasons with at least 100 runs batted in. And again, using that left-handed swing, that unorthodox in which he lifted his right foot just before impact, he was able to hit the ball at the short 257-foot right field porch at the Polo Grounds.
That did make a difference, Coogan's Bluff.
That's right.
Absolutely. Could you speak to his managerial career? What type of manager was he? Was he a player manager? Was he tough? Was he scholarly? Did he teach? What was he about?
He was easygoing, and I'll tell you why. Ott managed the Giants from 1942 until DeRocha was made the manager in 48. He wasn't very successful. The Giants' best finish during his tenure was third place in 42. Now, DeRocha made a comment, and it's based on Mel Ott. Nice guy.
No, if it's the nice guy finished last comment.
Yep. It is.
No, that was Bill Terry.
Really? Well, yeah, that's also about Terry as well. That's what we all know. But Ott's supposedly easygoing managing style made DeRocher nuts. he did. So yeah, you're talking about Bill Terry, but he also quoted it, about Ott. Ott was the first manager, though, I'll tell you this, to be ejected from both games of a doubleheader. When the Giants lost both games. Yeah, when the Giants lost both games to the Pittsburgh Pirates on June 9th, 1946. So,
all right.
I'm telling you, but you know what? He succeeded Chuck Dressen, and again, he became the Dodgers manager, I think, Dressen. And he coached the same
team. Leo.
Leo. Yeah. And he coached the same team that both Dressen and Casey coached, the Oakland Oaks of the Pacific Coast League in 51. And he led, again, an 88 finish, 7th place. In 52, the Oaks, however, finished 104 and 76 for 2nd place. Wasn't that spectacular of a manager, but he always had an easygoing, friendly kind of style. And I think that was important because, back then, even now, you get the bad boy image like Leo DeRocher or what was his name? Albert Bell was on Cleveland Indians. Or you could get squeaky clean. Like I'm going to have a show on Walter Johnson tomorrow. His grandson, Henry Thomas, wrote his definitive biography 20 years ago. He's going to be on the show. And you can have a squeaky clean.
We've had him. He is such a gentleman and such an articulate guy. You're really going to enjoy his company. He's been on our Senator show. And, you're very, very good at this, Ian. You seem to put together 2 shows a week on your show, Genesis. Tell our audience about that, because that show can be found right here on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And how did that get started? You weren't originally with Comfortably Zoned. You were doing this a while. And give me some background on your fine show.
Well, first of all, I do 3 shows on the Comfortably Zone. I'm also with Blumpkin and Dave Nemec's Old Time Baseball. So
that's right.
You could hear me there. You asked me to be here with the Giants, of course. Genesis was my idea, which was born out of the Facebook sites that I have, the Dugout, and all my historical baseball sites that 40,000 people follow me. So I wanted to carve a show that has history in it, and not only baseball but football. I'm going to have a couple of hockey shows. We have entertainers like Gloria Loring to come in on, but these are people who have changed the industry, whatever it is, sports and entertainment. And I wanted something that isn't going to be dirty, but is going to teach. And so Genesis, I was on a show 2 years ago in Detroit, and they were interviewing me about the Tigers and how they were going to do it. And for some reason, I have a huge following in Detroit, and it was the highest-rated show that they ever had. And they asked me, do you want your own show? And I said, well, I have to think about it. And so Genesis was born saying, well, you know what? I collect all these authors' books. I know baseball history. Let's make it primarily about baseball. We'll have some hockey. We'll have some football. We'll have some entertainment. And it mainly became a baseball historical show because what I'm disappointed about in today's fan is that a lot of people don't know the history of baseball, which is so important to the modern game. And what I try to do is give them, my listeners, a complete overhaul of what they might have heard, like with Charles Learson and Ty Cobb. And everyone goes around, well, Ty Cobb's in the Hall of Fame, and he was this disgusting person. But no, he wasn't, okay? If you read Ty Cobb, A Terrible Beauty, which, again, won numerous awards by author Charles Learson, there was new information that was dug up, and plus we learned that Al Stump, who was the original biographer of Ty Cobb, falsified a lot of stuff. And so we are shedding new light on greats like Ty Cobb.
What was Stump's issue with Ty Cobb? Why did he do that?
I think he sensationalized a lot of Cobb's life to sell books back in '61. Problem is, I think with Stump he made a huge blunder in doing that, because post-mortem, I mean, Ty Cobb didn't want the book published. He spent time with Ty Cobb, maybe about a week or so, a few days, gathering information. But when he fell into a hole and didn't know something, he just plugged the hole with, fabrications from the air. Now, 30 years later, wrote another book on Cobb, which was the basis for the movie with what's his name? I'm getting old. Tommy Lee Jones. He played Ty Cobb, which again is totally fictitious. It's not a true account, and it should be disregarded as pure fiction.
What hard evidence came to light?
The hard evidence that came to light was that Charles Learson was able to massive research, not only in the Ty Cobb Museum, but up in Detroit, in Washington, in Congress, and he was able to find, look, he was, his father really wasn't this great hatred of being prejudiced enough. His father was a professor, and his father's line of family came from a whole historical ancestry of being abolitionists. And
really?
growing up in Georgia. Now, who would know that now also?
Yeah, that's very strange.
Also,
Ty Cobb was an incredible businessman. I think it was Coke that he invested in.
He invested in Coca-Cola. Yes,
Coca-Cola, not Coke. That's
in those days, 5% of the Coca-Cola was made from the cocoa plant that does, get put into.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's amazing. I do shows on my personal podcast that aren't baseball, and believe it or not, everybody, I would like to someday do a show on prohibition of drugs, marijuana, cocaine, how all that came about. Both cannabis and Coke were used medicinally way back, and that's going to be an interesting show. I'm going to have some good folks on that. I just want to answer my own curiosity. How did Prohibition come to pass? And that's going to be the name of it. I can imagine how it came to pass with alcohol. I know that story. That's what made Joe Kennedy Joe Kennedy. Had to have something to invent the guy, and So Ty Cobb, you were talking. Did Ty Cobb play? Obviously, played against Mel Ott.
He did play against Mel Ott in his later years. However, by the time Mel Ott got going, and if you recall your history, 1926, we had a scandal, didn't we? And not many people know about it. Not many people know about it. Cobb and Trispika were accused of betting on baseball 7 years earlier, and both were made to resign as managers of their respective teams, Cobb for Detroit and Spreaker for Cleveland, by Ban Johnson, because there was incriminating letters, but it never admitted, it never showed guilt on either Cobb or Speaker or Smokey Joe Wood, who was part of this scandal before Commissioner Landis became commissioner. Now, no one has ever written a book on that. I had Gerald C. Wood on my show a few months ago. He wrote the definitive biography of Smokey Joe Wood. And we touched upon it. And I asked him, I said, Gerald, why didn't you get into the whole Speaker and Cobb affair, but for a page? I said, there's never been a book published about that, and I have huge archives and huge research on it that would shed light. And he, on the show, if you listen to it, he asked me to co-write the book, which I'm going to be getting together with him on July 7th. But the thing is, that's the third biggest scandal in baseball behind Pete Rose and the 1919 Black Sox. It tarnished Cobb's image for a month and Speaker until Landis got rid of all the charges because Dutch Leonard, who was accusing them of gambling, he was the pitcher for the day back then for Detroit, and he got into a run-in with Cobb, didn't testify. And so Landis said, for the good of the game, we can't hang Ty Cobb and Tris Speaker, two of the most, greatest players up until that time, besides Ruth and a few others. And so they were absolved. However, they did not go back to their respective teams. Speaker went to Washington, and Cobb went to Philadelphia. And he would play there for 2 years. Speaker would join him in 28, and that would be both of their last. They would play under County Mac.
Yeah, that's very fascinating when you think about it, because Landis came in right at the 1919 scandal.
Right.
And everybody talks about that as being the last one. And that was to clear everything up and blah, blah, blah. This comes as very little known. I'm learning right now as we speak.
And you know what about Landis? This is what I don't like about Landis. Landis, I think, when it came to gambling, he did shut it down. Okay, now, the reason why he was brought in, like you mentioned, was the whole 1919 World Series affair. And if you know your history, and I'll have Charles Fountain back on my show. He wrote The Betrayal last year, new updated book on the Chicago White Sox scandal of 1980. They were acquitted by a court of law. Okay? All of them were. Mm-hmm. So legally.
I think Al Seacott was Al Seacott acquitted as well.
Yep.
Oh,
yep.
All of these guys.
Yeah.
And
they were all acquitted. And Landis, to make a point, because, again, the prosecuting attorneys grilled Joe Jackson and a few others without having an attorney there. They said, no, you don't need an attorney. Just admit what was on. And they did. And Jackson said he received $10,000, but he was going to give it back. And Landis said, no. We are going to make an example of this so that for once and for all, and again, gambling's been, with baseball ever since you put a ball to a bat. And so all the years came down to Landis. Now, with 26, that was some kind of an enigma. Again, Landis was pissed off. He's like, why do I have to handle something that came prior to me becoming commissioner? This was done September 24th, I think, 1919. Meaningless game that year. Chicago had already wanted the division would play the Reds in the World Series, and the money was so little for Ty Cobb, who made great investments, as we mentioned. Why would he need the money? Why would Smokey Joe be in on it? Why would Tris Speaker was a known gambler, but the letters that were bought by Ban Johnson and the American League paid Dutch Lennon $20,000 for those letters that incriminated both Cobb and Speaker, but was not definitive in evidence to hang him. And when he refused to testify, Dutch Lennon, when he was summoned to Landis's office, Landis said, I don't have the freaking time for this. This is a waste of time. Tyko would never do it, and even if they did, the amount of money that we're talking about is so little, this has no place in my office. And bang, they were absolved. So we're going to get together. We're going to write the book. It's going to probably take about a year or so, but I think it's a story worth telling. I mean, Tyko's a fascinating thing, and what I like to do...
Tris Speaker is fascinating, too. Very unheralded in history. Before DiMaggio, he was the greatest center fielder in baseball history. Before DiMaggio came in, reputedly. I mean, that's all right up there.
And let me tell you about Tris Speaker. He coached in the Indians a long time, and when Larry Doby came on, for the 48th season, to improve Larry Doby's play, manager Lou Boudreau tapped Speaker to work with Larry Doby, and he helped him become a
Really?
Yeah. I'm reading the book right now. Speaker was brought in 48 to help work with Larry Doby, and you know something? He was a good coach, Speaker. That's what I...
Doby was a hell of an underrated ball player. And speaking of underrated, the manager of that team was Marty Marion, Slats.
He was. Now, Bill Veeck and him got along, great. I mean, in 47, like I said, Speaker returned to baseball. He remained in an advisory, coaching, and scouting roles for the Indians until he died in 58. Speaker is one of those little-known, again, we're talking about the dead ball era. But if you ask me, some of the greatest players came from the dead ball era, and you could all go to my sites, Tyko and the dead ball era. You learn something new every day, I mean, that's...
Right. Well, how about we conclude with a Mel Ott fact that most people don't know. A fact or a story?
Well, I think that they called him Master Melvin. I think people don't know that he was a 12-time All-Star. His total batting average was .304. He had 488 doubles, 1,860 RBIs. Now, Lefty O'Doul, whose book I've just gotten, which we'll be having a show on him next month, later said that one of the things that made Ott a great hitter was hard practice. And I think what people don't know about Mel Ott is because of his short stature, because of his inability to tower over a pitcher on a mound, he just practiced like Derek Jeter. He'd show up at the ballpark at 10 in the morning, and the game's 3 hours away, 4 hours away, and he would just practice. And Lefty O'Doul, and I'm going to quote him, we used to spend hours, just the two of us, practicing hitting the ball down the right field foul line. We got so we could keep it fair by just a few inches, and that's what made Mel Ott such a threat as a home run. You hit it in the Polo Grounds at 257 feet, and you learn to do it, and he learned to do it by working as hard as he did.
Nice. Work ethic pays. That nice to know for everybody, because you should get back for what you put in. That's how life should be. It isn't. Life is not fair. Some people work just as hard as Mel Ott and have nothing to show for it. But for the most part, if you rely on luck and nothing else, you're in big trouble in life. Whatever your career, whatever you're doing, hard work is, at least you feel like you're doing something to achieve. And you work hard, then you can say, hey, I worked hard. Things worked out, they didn't work out. but if you put everything you have into it, and there are some ball players that do. Did Mel Ott have any enemies? Did anybody not get along with him? And did he get along with Bill Terry, for instance, who was a longtime teammate? You tell me.
You know, Sam, there's really not much written about anyone not getting wrong with Mel Ott. You know, I think he had a very humble persona. I think that he was there. He showed up. It was a job for him, like I mentioned in his work ethic. He wasn't there to fool around or harass people like DeRocha did. That wasn't his style. His style was focusing, and you know, you hit 511 home runs in a ballpark that has a center field. I forget what the Polo Ground. What was it? 480? That center field.
Oh, at least. Yeah, it was just,
weird
immense park.
I mean, it was really weird dimensions, but he learned to hit it down the right field line where it just barely stays in. I think he was one of the nicest guys of baseball, if you want to ask me, including that era of from 26 to 47, when now we are coming into a more modern era, World War II and the Depression. And again, you have a lot of hate out there. Hank Greenberg is a definitive example of anti-Semitism of the time. And of course, Jackie Robinson would be ushered in and get crucified, not only by crowd members, but by opposing players and his own players. DeRocha had to get rid of those who were starting a petition against bringing Jackie on.
All right. If you want to play here, don't just write it down. You're going to be gone.
That's it.
Yeah.
But I think Mel Ott personified, you know, what a hero should be in baseball. You know, he's a nice guy. You can't really hang anything negative on him. He had nothing negative to hang on him, and he worked hard. And being such a little guy to do all that is really something. I really.
Yeah, that's what impresses me the most about what I've learned today is that I probably knew at one time or another that Mel Ott was not a big guy. I didn't realize 5'9", 150. Wow.
170. 170.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, that too. 5'9", 170. Think about that. Small
Crazy.
by any stretch of the imagination. Hey, Ian, thank you for being here, as usual. And Giants fans, keep a stiff upper lip. In recent history, you won 3 world championships. Take a little tough luck. Things happen. Again, if I didn't mention this last week, I have so much respect for Bumgarner, who made a mistake, as young people do, as old people do, and he copped to it. Unlike Jeff Kent, who made a similar mistake, hurt himself, and denied. So if you're going to root for somebody, root for the guy who's honest and straightforward. And you got that to look forward to when he comes back in June. And he will. Things will go on. Thanks, Ian. Great show. And we'll be back next week. Same bat channel as Alan Blumpkin says.
That's right. And you know something? The Giants do have a lot of hope because even though Bumgarner's injured, the replacement, Ty Bloch, or is it Bloch? I don't even know. He moved from the bullpen and he started well against Kershaw. So there is hope.
There is definitely hope, and I'll tell you what. Long term, I'd like to see the Giants move Posey to first base.
Well, you have to because of his knees. He has knee problems.
Yeah.
Like
long overdue. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening, and thank you, Ian, for being here.
Always
See
a
you
pleasure,
next week.
Ralph.
Adios, everybody.
Take care.